Hi, everyone. Welcome to a Mulberry Talent Partners Leadership Conversation. My name is Leah Pons, and I am the Talent Acquisition Specialist here at Mulberry. About Mulberry, we are a full-service recruiting agency serving the Pacific Northwest and the San Francisco Bay Area. Our specialty areas include human resources, administrative office, finance, accounting, payroll, and operations. I encourage you to check out our website at mulberrytalent.com to see previously recorded leadership conversations and to view our full suite of service offerings. So let's dive in today. Today, we are joined by our founder, Lauren Francis, and Julie Kearney. For over 20 years, Julie has been successfully helping leaders implement employee engagement programs that align with their mission, purpose, values, and culture. As a credentialed coach with the International Coaching Federation and a certified Gallup Clifton Strengths leadership coach, Julie has hundreds of hours coaching leaders through challenging real-world problems. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Julie Kearney and Lauren Francis.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. And Julie, thank you so much for joining us. This is your second time joining us in Mulberry Conversations and Leadership Conversations. So we're grateful to you for sharing this very important topic today. Julie and I met, about 10 years ago when she was CHR with Ecova NG Corporation. We initially met when we were a staffing partner to her at Ecova and then followed her to her next organization. And now she is a well-known HR leader here in Portland. And Julie is our leadership coach here at Mulberry. And we are getting tremendous value from our relationship with Julie. Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you wanted to just jump right in.
Yeah, Lauren, thank you so much. And thank you everyone who is joining the webinar. This is a favorite topic of mine. And when Lauren asked me if there was any correlation between onboarding and engagement, I'm like, oh yes, there is. And let's talk about it. So I am excited about today's session. Okay, so who am I? Lauren and Leah did a beautiful job talking about who I am. If you know anything about coaching, you will probably understand or hear the International Coaching Federation, ICF for short. That is the gold standard for leadership coaching. And I'm also a Clifton Strengths coach. One of the reasons I love Clifton Strengths is because when I entered the workforce, it was all about trying to fix what was broken, look at what our weaknesses are, and then fix that. And what I love about the Gallup Strengths approach is it's about positive psychology, actually looking at what your strengths are and utilizing that to really access your power and your strengths to achieve your goals. So I love both of those tools that I'm using, and I am excited to share with you about what we're going to learn today, which of course is about quiet quitting. We've heard a lot about that. And then how to build your onboarding plan to really enhance your employee engagement and essentially combat what we know now as quiet quitting. So let's jump in. So here's some recent data from Gallup. Gallup and Clifton Strengths are the same company. And for those of you who love data like me, I am a data geek. I can't get enough of it because in some ways it only validates what I already know. And there was a recent study done by Gallup where the employee engagement for US workers were only 32% of employees are engaged. And what does that even mean? SHRM, of which a lot of us know, have given us some information about what it costs an organization when we have turnover or people who leave. And employee turnover can be as much as 50% in the first 4 months of hourly workers. So if you hire hourly workers, that revolving door may be happening for you. And then 50% in the first 18 months for senior level or what you might call the salaried staff. So this is a really high cost to organizations. And some conservative estimates say that it will cost a company 1.5 to 2 times an employee's annual salary to identify and then onboard a replacement.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little stunning, right? So if you think about how many people left in a year and then you multiply that 1.5 to 2 times, the numbers, and I did this information when I was at Acova, and it was in the millions of dollars. And this was leaking out of the organization. This isn't from lost sales or because we didn't deliver, it was just literally leaking out. And when we think about disengagement, sometimes we don't know what that looks like. So I've done some research about this, and disengagement can look like different things based upon different people. You might have heard of flight, fight, and freeze. So if someone has a response when they are in stress, some of us are in flight, that's me, and some of us are in freeze, and some of us are in fight. So if someone has, and this is not always, and of course, these are just generalizations, but when a person is in a fight response, they can be naysayers, they can be argumentative, they can perhaps be rude, they can be a toxic stew to the organization. That's usually in the fight. But don't forget that there are some people who are in a freeze or a flight mode, which it could be withdrawal. They used to be very communicative in meetings and now they're not. And this goes on for time. They can just not show up for work, or they can be complacent. And so that's where this whole quiet quitting thing came from. It's basically about employee engagement. And employee engagement is not that of a fun phrase as quiet quitting. And essentially, that's one of the things that I feared the most, is when people literally quit but never left the organization because they were taking a spot and they were not engaged and not contributed as to how we would want them to do. So Lauren, you've probably worked with a lot of companies who are experiencing some of this quiet quitting, so to speak. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, there was a couple questions. One is that, is this new? Is this a new phenomenon? I mean, you were at Acova for a number of years. Gosh, you were there, 11 years?
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah. And so did you see this then and farther down the road, or is this a new phenomenon? And is this kind of the whole COVID related? If you could put some perspective on it, that'd be great.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Lauren. And in my opinion, this has been around for a while. Gallup has been studying employee engagement for dozens of years. And the quiet quitting actually it's a cool phrase, right? It really helps you think about what's happening. And employee engagement is maybe not as front page news, but it's been going on for a very long time. And when I talked about what that disengagement looks like, you may be thinking back, has there been times where I've seen team members like that? Or have I ever felt like that? Prior to going to Acova, there were a couple of positions that I was in where I was withdrawing. I wasn't talking as much and always showed up for work, but it was different than when I was engaged. And so part of what we need to think about is employee engagement and how to improve the employee engagement that we have based upon what we know. There was a study, of course, done by Gallup that's one of the things that I love about them, is that they are focused on employee engagement and how to improve employee engagement. So these 5 things came back as the number one things that will engage employees: clarity of expectations, connection to your mission and purpose of the company, opportunities to learn and grow, opportunities for employees to do what they do best, and feeling cared about at work. Now, what I'm going to be talking about with onboarding is you're actually going to be able to address these in your onboarding program. However, this is also something that you need to be thinking about for all employees. There's a new data that came out about millennials, and opportunities to learn and grow is a key part of what's important to them. You think about where millennials are in their life cycle, 30 to 35 years old. They're trying to buy a house, starting a family. And so money is important. And they also care a lot about what their own development looks like. So does that resonate, Lauren?
Completely. And it's an ongoing process. And I think the onboarding piece is huge. And I'm glad we're talking about this. It makes a huge difference, but then it's an ongoing relationship, and the transparency that organizations, I feel, you need to bring that into the conversation. and include employees on more of what's going on in the organization and not have many
Mhm.
siloed conversations and so on. This is just a very important topic. Thank you.
So one of the things that I train on is leadership. I don't know about you, Lauren, but I was first put into a leadership position because I was a high achiever and a high performer. And all of a sudden I am managing all of these people. I had no idea what to do. And so part of my passion is sharing leadership, of course, my own experiences, and of course, the research and learning about how the best leadership practices. So that's some of the leadership consulting that I do, which is helping leaders understand how to address some of these employee engagement issues.
And modern leadership is
And modern leadership.
modern leadership is critical. And that means that's a loaded statement, but it's really true that what you're sharing is critical for leaders to embrace and provide.
Yeah, that's right. And I appreciate that point. When I first started working, I thought about my performance review. I thought about, okay, I have to make sure my boss was happy. And I was focused on all my weaknesses. I mentioned earlier, that's why I was so intrigued by Clifton Strengths, is because trying to fix weaknesses is actually not productive. But if you understand your strengths and use your different strengths, it can be very empowering. And it's actually just so much more fun to do work that you love to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's get to onboarding. Recent study, data again, only 12% of employees will strongly agree that their organization does a great job onboarding new employees. 12%. We talked about turnover before. The consequences of this significant turnover within the first year of employment, onboarding is a key part of that. The question is, well, what's happening? What's going wrong with our onboarding programs, and how can we fix it? And as a head of HR, I obviously didn't have all of the answers. And then I've done lots of research since then, but here's some key things that I learned and research borne out on these 5 areas. So we're going to focus on each one.
One thing really quickly, Julie.
Yeah.
Onboarding is very important, but pre-boarding also is important, meaning that if you make an offer to someone 3 weeks ago, there is a pre-boarding engagement that is very important for that hire.
Yeah, I love that, Lauren, because you're right. Onboarding, I think it actually starts at the recruitment cycle, right?
Yeah.
That whole experience from the first point that someone is being contacted by your company. We're going to talk about that, about embodying your company culture. And yes, it bleeds over or into recruiting. And then there is this specific thing that usually companies have, an onboarding program. What does that look like? But I appreciate that question so much, because there is such a tight link between the pre-boarding, which begins in recruitment, to today, which is our onboarding, what we're talking about. One of the things that I learned is when onboarding was just seen as an HR thing, it didn't really work very well. And data has proven that out. Gallup has found that when managers take an active role in onboarding, employees are 3 to 4 times as likely to agree that the onboarding experience was exceptional. 3 to 4 times strongly agree. So why? Because if it's just an HR thing, recruiting is usually handled by HR, so that we might have the pre-boarding process done pretty well. And then an employee comes, our job sometimes is done. Well, and then here's this employee just hanging out there, not feeling great at all. And I'll tell a little story on me. There was an employee that I hired, and our onboarding program needed a little help. She didn't have a computer the first 2 days of her time on my team. She never forgot that. She never forgot that she didn't have a computer. And so it wasn't about the computer. It was, am I here? Do you care? Do you care about me? And so onboarding can be a very personal thing. And so HR and managers need to work together to help it feel seamless.
Yeah. Similar to like when, hotels, they prepare for their guests. There's a lot of preparation that goes into that. And it's the same thing, and so with employees, it's very similar. You prepare for that employee, whether it's the computer or all the other things that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's about the experience and what someone feels like for the experience.
Yeah.
The second thing is, it's just not a one-time event. There is some data that shows they surveyed bank tellers. So these are hourly employees. It takes them 12 to 15 months to actually ramp up into their role. And for personal bankers, 15 to 18 months.
My goodness.
So if you're thinking that your onboarding program is that the manager has done the work and we've taken them to lunch and we're done, that is probably not going to be as robust as you'd want it to be. And think about the level of skill that's required, how much time it takes for someone to really understand your company and your culture and build your program in that way. Some companies do a 30-day, 90-day, and a 1-year assessment. That's usually ran by HR. It's an opportunity for you to gain data, and we're going to talk about getting data for how your program is working. Other companies have that as a meeting with the manager, 30 days, 90 days, and a year in. And I talked about some of the leadership training that I do. There's this whole cycle of learning and work that I train managers on so that they are thinking about their employees and have tools to help them manage their employees in a way that is engaging them throughout their entire life cycle as an employee.
Well, it sounds like the company culture. So if you think about it, how many times have we seen on a job description incorporating in this piece? Because it's an ongoing process. And is this critically important to organizations, and how does it show up at all levels of the organization?
Yeah, and you hit on that third point, Lauren. And I believe every company culture is a little bit different. And your program shouldn't be a cookie cutter. I don't think it should be a cookie cutter. And one of the things I love about working with Lauren is Mulberry has a brand. They have a culture, and it's very clear about who they are and what they want. And it does start from the point of recruitment all the way through. So their employees who are interested in becoming a Mulberry employee are experiencing that company culture. Don't you think, Lauren? I mean, you've thought about that and you've integrated that into your own company.
Agreed. And last week we had a stumble, right? We had one of those weeks and we discovered some things that we weren't doing very well or doing at all. And it was such an eye opener. And the point is that it's how do you learn from that? What do you do about it? And one is you act quickly and you're transparent and you bring everyone into the conversation. Now, we're not a large team, but we really stumbled last week. And now we've implemented some new ways, actually, bringing back to our culture and to our mission. And we tied it up within 24 hours. We started to have these conversations right away so that everybody learn from it. And so we're still having ongoing conversations, but it's created a whole new structure for our organization. And we were able to pivot quickly. And regardless of your size, it's important to look at what's happening and act.
Yeah, 100% agree. And your onboarding program should reflect your company culture, whatever that looks like. And I'm not talking about the words on a page that you put on the wall. We've all been parts of, maybe not everybody, but I was a part of a company where the company's values were on the wall and that was not exhibited in the company culture. Part of what makes an onboarding program work is when it truly does embody what it feels like to be a part of the company. Gallup has this saying that what is culture? It's how we do things around here, is how they say it. And why I like that is because it's not some big, long explanation, and it's external things that you see, but it's also the nonverbals, the norms, the things that happen in a culture that everyone knows about, but are probably not talked about. So think about that when you are thinking about how to put together your onboarding program and weave it in as if you're creating this amazing tapestry. How does that show up for you and your company culture? So one of the things I promised to do is link back this onboarding program to the employee engagement, not just an HR thing. One of the things that I train on is setting clear expectations, how to do that. There's actually a formula that I train to for how to create clear expectations. And the number one thing for employee engagement is, do I understand what success looks like? Do I have clear expectations? So when it's not an HR thing and you and the manager are working together, you're setting clear expectations. When it's not more than a one-time event, you're connecting that to the mission and purpose as well as the culture, right? Mission and purpose is really important to the people's engagement. And then let's talk about a compelling vision for the future. One of the things I talked about earlier is how important growth and development are for all employees, but specifically for Gen Z and millennials. So part of what you're trying to help people understand is how can you grow and progress in this company? What does that look like? And I'm not talking about everybody needs to have a promotion every year. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is what kind of development conversations are your managers having with your employees? How often are they being discussed? How much time are managers and employees interacting, not just about the work, but also about goals, their passions, and what they're really good at and what they'd like to do? Helping build some part of that compelling vision of their future into your onboarding program.
I also think too that leaders are mentors. And that mindset is so important. And that's what people want is a mentorship relationship. And the word boss, I've thought this for a while, it does not resonate with me at all. It's just not a word that I think we should be using to refer to the person that we work with and for. And the blend between boss and employee, that's shifting to more of a relationship. I think that's what people want is they want a real connection and a mentorship. Now, I will say that's just one of the most important things that I see in the changes that take place in inspirational and dedicated leaders. That's a modern leader. A leader that mentors. And that is part of what they embody in themselves and within the organization. And for example, Mulberry is a small company, but we want to create opportunities for people within our organization so that they can thrive. And so in every situation, it might be about stretch assignments and encouraging people to do that. And also thinking about an employee at work with you now, but thinking about their career and helping them think about their career. And that's where the mentorship piece comes in. I just find that way of thinking is what everyone wants.
You're absolutely right, Lauren. And there's recent data to show what your theory is absolutely fact, that we don't want a boss anymore. We actually want someone who cares about our development, is interested in supporting that and talking to us about it. I remember I used to talk to my boss like once a year. Right? Except for, oh, do this or do that. That is changing. And to use Lauren's perfect analogy is the modern leader. And it is different and it can feel a little overwhelming. I have to admit, it feels a little overwhelming to those of us who are leaders. And there's ways to get those tools for you. And Lauren's doing a great job of providing opportunities like this for you to think about that. The other thing Lauren mentioned earlier was metrics. So again, me being a big data person, I approach almost everything I do based upon data. So using a growth mindset, the growth mindset is taking what's happened and using that to adjust to your learnings. So let's say one of the things that you should do is measure how well your onboarding program is actually working. So employees who strongly agree that their onboarding program works, they're rating it either a 4 or a 5. And when the onboarding is a 5, they're twice as likely to agree that they're fully prepared and ready to excel in the job that they're in. First, measure, how is it going? On a scale of 1 to 5, a Likert scale is usually the easiest scale to use. And then have comments. What do people want to see differently? And instead of seeing that as, oh, my onboarding plan failed, think about it as, oh, wow, this is great data that I can use to get better, right?
Yep.
So use that growth mindset as you adjust. I remember one of my employees in my HR team said, why are we keep fixing the onboarding program? We just launched it. It's because we got some data that's showing that it's not as working as well as we thought it was going to. So we're going to adjust. And yes, it takes time to do that. And if you don't do it, you actually really don't know. You don't know if it's working the way you think it is. And we all know, we just talked about how much money it costs for people to exit the organization. If you want to keep that money in your organization, onboarding is a really cool way to do that. All right, so that was a lot of information in a very short period of time. I was talking pretty fast. Leah, do we have questions, or do people have some questions that they would like to have us work from?
While we wait for those to come in, which I would love to hear from some folks, I would say that I think in organizations now, you can't just create a program, whether it's onboarding or something else, and have it just park it. Okay, we're done. We created it. It's done. It's an ongoing, living, breathing organism. That's how we need to look at organizations, because that's what they are. It's like any relationship. I was listening to someone, a leader the other day, and one of his points too was people are looking too much for the organizations to solve everything for them. It's I need this, I want that, I want this, I want that. And that's fine. I want to know what you have to say about this, because this is what his point was, is that it's the company has their responsibilities and the employee have their responsibilities to grow and thrive in the organization. And how would you respond to that?
Yeah, the organizations are shifting, right? So you don't need to solve all the problems and promote everyone all the time. One of the things you talked about is I thought of moving up as a ladder. Now there's this thought about thinking about it as a jungle gym. Maybe you're in this one job. What about thinking about going and getting this other experience over here? If your organization, it would need perhaps would be a little bit larger than Mulberry, opportunities to move and flex within the organization rather than just moving up, right? So think about that if you are an HR leader. There's a question here, which I love. Do you have best practices specifically for organizations that are 100% remote? Okay, I love this question because remote work is here to stay. We all know that, right? There's lots of data and study to show that hybrid and remote work is the way of the future. So one of the things that I have found is there are some great recruiting and onboarding tools out there that are very helpful in helping you go through the mechanics. And type of a webinar or training session using the tools that Zoom allows you, or other tools like Teams, utilizing breakouts, having executives come in and talk about your company culture. Let's say you have a culture that safety is very important to you. Have your executives come in at a certain point in the onboarding. Let's say you have a day-long session or a couple different sessions that you're doing for onboarding. Have them pop in and share some of their own experiences. The main thing to think about when you're doing remote is don't make it very long. So if your session was a whole day in person, you need to break it up into 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different sessions, because it's just too much. If you have to sit in there on a video for all day, you're going to lose people. So break it up and don't try to replicate the in-person experience, because you need to think about it a little bit differently.
Someone asked, do you have any onboarding feedback survey samples?
I'm sure I do somewhere in my list of files. So what I would encourage you to think about is, okay, let's think about these 5 things I have on the screen. Survey that. I would also take Lauren's advice, the pre-boarding, and somebody made a comment about pre-boarding to hotels for prepping for guests. I love that. So maybe there's a pre-board, and then there is the onboarding experience. And I would have a question about each one of these areas and open for feedback from each one of these. So take this information and think about how it would fit for your own organization. Okay, what other questions? There's one. Hi, we've recently begun partnering HR reps with supervisors to support the first 3 months of employee onboarding, mostly warehouse positions, non-exempt type roles. Any suggestions on how we, HR, coach, but still give supervisors and managers the authority and responsibility for being primary owner of the relationship and process? Oh, I love this question. Part of what happens when you are an HR person and you're working with the manager is it can be about unclear roles and expectations. Who really owns this? I would say HR probably owns it from pre-boarding through maybe perhaps until the person arrives. And then it's a shared relationship. And then the manager picks it up. So think about it almost as this curve, right? Think about it in that way. And where does HR come in, and where do you share, and where do you then hand off to the manager? I'm a huge fan of the RACI model, which is basically about roles and responsibilities. If you have more than a couple people involved in a process, it's important to be really clear about who is responsible and who gets informed and who's supporting. So if you don't know what the RACI model is, it stands for RASCI. There's other models out there that work as well, but use that as a tool to help people understand where the roles and responsibilities sit. And of course, don't just hand it off, throw it over the fence and say, oh, here's your job. Make sure that you've talked to the manager, and this is a shared experience, right? They want their people. They don't want to go through the revolving door of recruiting either. They don't want that. Get them into this work with you, and it makes a huge difference.
Don't you also think the mindset of the leader, the manager, whoever you want to call that person, should be thinking about how that person is absorbing the information or absorbing the relationship, meaning that we care about how that person's experience is. If you have a house guest, you want to make sure the house is ready and you've done your pre-boarding and what kinds of things you want in the refrigerator and whatever, but care about that guest having a good experience and a good time in your home and feel welcome.
Absolutely.
And maybe have activities planned or dinner reservations or whatever, and you're really just a good host or hostess.
Yeah, that's right.
Same thing goes, we have to think about it. We have to forget out, this is my job. It's also more than that.
Yeah. That's right. And we're all busy, and sometimes managers are overwhelmed. And so this is where HR, when you're really partnering with that leader, can make a big difference. HR can do a lot of the heavy lifting and the organization. So the manager can do what I would call the relationship building of onboarding. So that's where the shared relationship can come in. And if you've got an HR team and you've got someone who is really detail oriented and great at process, that's your person to put on onboarding. And then you're going to need somebody who can connect with those managers at the same time. So data shows us that a great onboarding program keeps people in their seat, not just in the first few months, but over years at a time. Remember that story I told you about that woman that I hired and she didn't have a computer for 2 days? She still talks about that. So it's a big thing. People care about it because it makes them feel, when an onboarding program works, it makes, you're ready for me. You want me here. You're excited to have me. And I'm excited to be here too.
Yeah, that's great. Gosh, thank you so much, Julie. This was such a lively conversation. It was so informative, and really appreciate you being here. And I appreciate all of the people that participated today. Yeah. And it's a great conversation.
Yes, love it. Feel free to reach out to me if you have other questions. I think I'm easy to find on LinkedIn or on my company. So Lauren, thank you for this opportunity. I've enjoyed it so much.
Thank you so much, Julie. We'll talk soon. Have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.